Some people carry a silence inside them that feels like home. It's not peace, but something that resembles it, familiar, almost soothing in its emptiness. It's the same stillness that draws a woman toward the man who never quite looks back, the one who listens but never reveals, the one who reaches out just enough to keep her waiting, but never enough to let her in. He is not a villain. He is a mirror. And the woman drawn to him is not foolish. She is remembering something her soul has known all along. In the language of Carl Jung, attraction is rarely about the person standing in front of us. It is about the shadow, that part of the psyche that holds everything we have not yet owned within ourselves. It whispers, "Come closer," not because love awaits there, but because truth does. You may think you are falling for his eyes, his voice, his restraint. But the truth is deeper. You are falling for your own unhealed reflection, the echo of love once withheld, the cold warmth of approval once chased. And until you see that pattern clearly, your heart will keep leading you in circles, back to the same type of man, with a different name and face, but the same invisible wall. There's a moment, often subtle, almost invisible, where she feels the pull begin. It's not a conscious choice. It's an ancient recognition. His emotional distance feels oddly magnetic, his self-containment alluring. She tells herself she is drawn to his mystery, his independence, his strength. But beneath that admiration lies something older, the familiar ache of trying to earn connection. She doesn't realize that the nervous system recognizes emotional inconsistency as excitement. Her body, shaped by early survival, interprets uncertainty as chemistry. So the absence of warmth becomes the signal for love. And so she reaches, again. When she texts and waits. When she explains herself one more time, hoping to be understood. When she interprets silence as depth. She's not weak, she's patterned. Her longing is the echo of an inner child who once had to prove her worth to be chosen. In Jungian language, the anima, the feminine aspect within all human beings, seeks wholeness through connection. But when her development is interrupted by emotional neglect or conditional love, she grows up learning to bond through projection. She projects her light, her tenderness, her capacity for love, onto another, often someone who cannot hold it. And that man, often emotionally unavailable himself, becomes the canvas of her inner work. He is not the reward, he is the teacher. He awakens her pain not to hurt her, but to mirror the distance she holds from her own heart. He does not withhold love. He reveals where she withholds love from herself. The emotionally unavailable man often carries his own shadow, his own unspoken wounds. He, too, was once a child who learned that closeness was dangerous, that vulnerability was weakness, that to be seen was to risk loss. So he builds walls, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. And those walls create the very allure that calls her in. This is not romance. It is the psyche's way of orchestrating its own healing ritual. The attraction between them is sacred, but not because it's destined to last. It is sacred because it reflects two unhealed parts of the same human story meeting again to complete their lesson. The feminine reaches toward love. The masculine retreats into silence. The dance begins. Push and pull. Warmth and withdrawal. Hope and despair. And in that tension, the shadow speaks. Sometimes she tells herself that if she can just show him how pure her love is, he will soften. If she can understand him deeply enough, he will open. If she can hold space long enough, he will stay. But she is not really waiting for him. She is waiting for herself. For the moment she realizes that her worth does not depend on being chosen by the one who cannot choose. It's here, in this ache, that the individuation process begins. The moment she stops interpreting his distance as rejection and starts seeing it as reflection, she steps out of the pattern. This is where shadow work turns from theory to transformation. There is a scene that plays out quietly in many lives. A woman sits across from a man who once made her feel alive. He's present, but unreachable. His eyes wander when she speaks. His energy remains closed. She asks gentle questions. He answers with half sentences. Her heart races, trying to bridge the space between them. But no bridge holds. Because this conversation isn't really between two people. It's between her unmet needs and his unhealed fear. In Jungian terms, she has projected her inner masculine, her logic, strength, and validation, onto him. She's waiting for him to play the role of the inner father she never truly had. But no man can permanently hold that projection. The psyche will always push her back toward herself. When she realizes this, something begins to shift. The longing remains, but it becomes quieter. Her explanations fade. Her chase slows. And in the silence that follows, she hears the faint voice of her own truth. You don't have to earn love. You are love. Every emotionally unavailable person who enters her life serves as a mirror to her attachment style, the unconscious template built in early relationships. The anxious lover meets the avoidant. The pursuer meets the distancer. Together, they reenact a psychological play designed not to destroy, but to awaken. Through the lens of trauma psychology, this is the nervous system attempting to complete an unfinished story. The body remembers what the mind forgets: the coldness of absence, the sweetness of intermittent affection. And so, it searches for the same energy in adulthood, hoping for a different ending. But unless consciousness interrupts the pattern, the story repeats. The stage may change. The actors may differ. But the ache remains the same. So what does awakening look like? It's not a grand act of resistance. It's a slow, quiet withdrawing of energy from the wrong direction. It's the moment she stops sending paragraphs trying to make someone see her worth, and instead, she sees herself. It's the moment she stops asking, "Why doesn't he love me?" and begins asking, "Why do I need his love to feel whole?" It's the realization that emotional unavailability is not punishment, it's pattern recognition. The psyche, through pain, invites her to return home to herself. In Stoic philosophy, detachment is not indifference. It's clarity. It's the ability to witness one's desire without being consumed by it. The Stoic and the Jungian meet here, where the woman learns to hold her longing not as weakness, but as a signal. A message from her unconscious whispering. You are chasing what you already are. When she begins to integrate this truth, the energy within her changes subtly. The chase loses its power. Her nervous system settles. Her body no longer confuses distance for safety. She begins to see that her attraction to emotionally unavailable people was never a curse. It was the sacred fire of evolution. Because in trying to love the unreachable man, she was being shown the parts of herself that had yet to be reached. There comes a night, always a quiet one, when the mind grows too tired to chase. No messages left unsent, no promises left to interpret, no more waiting for change that never comes. The heart does not break this night, it simply stops bargaining. This is not despair. It is clarity wearing grief's clothing. The woman sits with her silence like an old friend. And for the first time, she begins to understand. She was never really chasing him. She was chasing connection, the one she once lost long before she met him. Every emotionally unavailable person carries a certain magnetic coldness. It's not cruelty, it's absence. A quiet absence that triggers the oldest ache within the feminine psyche. The longing to be seen by someone who never learned how to look. And so she explains herself, again and again, hoping that with enough clarity he will finally understand. But he doesn't. He cannot. For his own heart has been sealed behind walls that even he cannot access. The more she explains, the more he retreats. The more she opens, the colder he becomes. To the unconscious, this feels familiar, almost safe. Because somewhere deep within, she once had to perform to be loved. She once believed that love had to be earned. And so, when love withdraws, her body reads it as an invitation, not to leave, but to try harder. In Jungian terms, this is the cycle of the shadow of love. The hidden part of the psyche that confuses bonding with survival. It whispers, if you can make him stay, you'll finally be enough. But the soul knows better. The soul knows that every rejection carries a map back to the parts of ourselves that we've abandoned. She begins to notice how often her tenderness turns into tension. How often she forgets to breathe when he pulls away. How her body goes still when he grows distant, as if bracing for impact. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. the body remembering what it means to wait for love that doesn't arrive. The feminine, when unhealed, seeks safety through merging. She believes that to be loved, she must dissolve into the other, become smaller, quieter, softer, more accommodating. But this isn't love, it's fusion born from fear. The fear that without him, she will vanish. In truth, she is not invisible. She has simply been living inside a story that told her she was. The emotionally unavailable partner does not hide her worth. He reveals where she has hidden it herself. Every unanswered message mirrors the way she once ignored her own needs. Every cancelled plan mirrors the times she dismissed her own feelings. Every half-hearted apology mirrors the way she apologized for existing. The attraction to the unavailable is not punishment, it's revelation. It shows her exactly where she abandoned herself. And once she begins to see this, the energy shifts from pain to power. Because the moment she stops asking, "Why won't he choose me?" and begins asking, "Where did I stop choosing myself?" the pattern begins to dissolve. In trauma psychology, this shift is called reversal of focus, when the external fixation is replaced with internal awareness. The nervous system, once addicted to the highs and lows of unavailable love, slowly learns to find safety in stillness. She no longer interprets neutrality as boredom or calmness as absence. Instead, she starts craving the one thing she never truly had: emotional consistency. It's not that she no longer desires love. It's that she no longer confuses love with chaos. There's a paradox in this healing. The very moment she stops trying to earn connection is the moment real connection becomes possible. Because energy that once begged to be understood now stands still, magnetic, grounded, sovereign. The woman who stops chasing does not become cold. She becomes clear. She begins to see men not through the lens of fantasy, but through the lens of truth. She sees who is emotionally available and who is not, without judgment, without hope of changing them. She stops trying to rewrite others' stories and begins to write her own. This is the birth of self-respect, the quiet flame of individuation that Jung spoke of, the sacred process of integrating the shadow into light. No longer split between the one who loves and the one who is loved. She begins to merge them into one wholeness, the one who is love itself. It's in this phase of awakening that something unexpected happens. She meets another emotionally unavailable man. But this time, the pull feels different. There's still an echo of attraction, the old pattern calling out. But her body no longer vibrates with urgency. The ache is replaced by observation. She sees the walls, the distance, the emotional hiding. And for the first time, she doesn't try to fix it. She simply sees it. Her silence, once born of confusion, is now born of awareness. This is the moment Jung described as shadow integration, when what was once unconscious becomes conscious. The energy that once controlled her is now visible, nameable, and therefore powerless. She no longer needs to chase what withholds love because she's no longer afraid of her own loneliness. In that stillness, something profound happens. She begins to meet herself. The self she meets is not fragile, not desperate, not defined by rejection. It's the version of her that has always existed beneath the noise. The self that doesn't explain, doesn't prove, doesn't beg to be seen. This self understands that love cannot flourish where there is no emotional availability, not because she is unworthy, but because love requires presence, and presence cannot come from someone still hiding from their own heart. So she releases him, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. She stops asking for closure, because she realizes that she is the closure. This is the power that terrifies the emotionally unavailable. When the woman who once explained herself simply goes quiet, the silence that follows is not empty, it's sacred. In that silence, she reclaims her energy from every place she once poured it. She retrieves her power from every apology she never owed. And she finally sees that love isn't something she needs to find, it's what flows through her when she stops betraying herself. In the stillness, she begins to feel her emotions without shame, the grief, the longing, the anger, the fatigue. She doesn't rush to transcend them, she allows them to breathe. Each feeling becomes a teacher, each ache a doorway. And through that process, she discovers what Jung called the self. The center of the psyche, beyond persona, beyond projection, beyond the old stories of lack. The emotionally unavailable man doesn't vanish from her world, but his spell breaks. He no longer defines her sense of desirability. She can love him from a distance, compassionately, without needing to be chosen. She understands that his walls are his journey, not her responsibility. And in that awareness, her energy transforms from pursuit to peace. She becomes magnetic not because she's playing a game, but because she's no longer trapped in one. When she walks into a room, her presence feels different. There's no hunger in her eyes, no question mark in her energy. She's not asking anyone to validate her, she's simply being. And ironically, it's in this stillness that love begins to move toward her. Because the universe, like the psyche, mirrors the energy we emit. When we stop chasing the unavailable, we stop vibrating with lack. And life begins to respond to our wholeness, not our wounds. Somewhere in this unfolding, she realizes that she was never truly attracted to him. She was attracted to the story her shadow needed to complete. And once that story ends, the spell dissolves. She no longer confuses familiarity with fate. This realization doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in a quiet morning, perhaps with a cup of tea in hand, when she thinks of him, and feels nothing but softness. Not desire, not resentment, just release. That's the sign that individuation has begun. When the person who once triggered your deepest wounds becomes the one who awakened your deepest self. She no longer searches for the emotionally unavailable, because she no longer fears the intimacy of her own truth. Her energy is no longer the anxious pull of, choose me, but the serene glow of, I am already enough. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Fate was never the man who couldn't love her. Fate was her unconscious leading her back to herself. Through him, through heartbreak, through silence, through awakening. There is a point in every woman's journey when she stops asking why, and starts seeing. It's not an intellectual seeing, not the kind that lives in words or theories. It's a felt truth, quiet, grounded, undeniable, like recognizing your own reflection after years of searching for it in others. This moment arrives slowly. No epiphany, no grand revelation, just a calm awareness that spreads through her like morning light. The ache softens. The urgency fades. And she begins to understand that what she called attraction was often her soul's cry for integration. For years, she mistook intensity for intimacy. Now, she recognizes it for what it was, trauma chemistry. That spark, that obsessive pull, that emotional roller coaster. It was never love. It was her nervous system reenacting the familiar rhythm of emotional inconsistency. The same dance of hope and withdrawal she once knew as a child. But today, her body knows something new, peace. And peace, to the unhealed mind, can feel almost boring at first. Because when chaos has been home, calm can feel like exile. She learns to sit with that discomfort, the unease of stability, until stillness no longer feels like loneliness, but safety. This is the beginning of emotional repatterning, the healing of the nervous system through awareness. Every time she chooses calm over chaos, she reparents her own inner child. Every time she resists the urge to chase, she teaches her body that love doesn't have to be earned. And slowly, she begins to trust her own energy again. Carl Jung said that the shadow is not evil, it's the part of us that longs to be seen. And now, she understands, the men she attracted were not her curse, they were her mirrors. They carried the unacknowledged fragments of her own psyche. The man who couldn't express emotion mirrored the part of her that silenced her own pain. The one who feared commitment reflected the part of her still afraid to be fully known. The one who withheld affection illuminated the place within her that still withheld self-compassion. Each connection was a dialogue between her conscious self and her unconscious wounds. Each heartbreak was a teacher, guiding her toward wholeness. Now, she begins to meet those inner parts directly, not through men, but through presence. There is a ritual she begins to practice without even realizing it. Whenever she feels the pull toward someone emotionally unavailable, she pauses. She places a hand on her heart and asks, "What part of me is asking to be loved right now?" Sometimes the answer comes as a whisper, a forgotten version of herself, small and tender, who once begged to be seen. Other times, it's silence, not empty, but spacious. And she learns to sit in that silence, to breathe into it, to let it teach her patience. This is what Jung called integration, the act of bringing light to what once lived in shadow. The woman who once externalized her longing now becomes the mother of her own inner world. She tends to the neglected emotions that once sought validation through another. In doing so, she dissolves the unconscious contract that kept her chasing what was never meant to stay. But healing, like the tides, moves in waves. There are days she feels free, radiant, expansive, whole. And then, there are days when old patterns whisper her name again. She catches herself checking her phone, waiting for a reply that never comes. She hears the old voice that says, "Maybe if you try one more time?" And in those moments, she smiles gently, not in shame, but in compassion. Because she understands that healing isn't about never slipping back. It's about waking up faster each time she does. This is the quiet mastery that no one sees. Not the dramatic ending of a story, but the daily act of choosing consciousness over compulsion. This is how transformation truly happens, one moment of awareness at a time. The emotionally unavailable man still exists in the world, but her relationship to him has changed. He no longer feels like destiny. He feels like data, information, a mirror she can now look into without losing herself inside the reflection. She notices his emotional distance and feels curiosity instead of panic. She observes his avoidance not as rejection, but as protection, his own. And with that awareness, compassion replaces resentment. Because now she knows, people love to the level of their own healing. She doesn't need to fix him. She doesn't need to wait for him to awaken. She simply honors his journey while walking hers. That is what true detachment means. Not disinterest, but discernment. In Stoic philosophy, there's a teaching. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. For the woman who once made her happiness dependent on another's availability, this truth lands like a liberation. Because for the first time, she understands. His silence no longer defines her. His inconsistency no longer destabilizes her. His confusion no longer becomes her mirror. She stands at the center of her own psyche now, not seeking love as a remedy for emptiness, but as an expression of fullness. This shift is not loud. It's not something the world applauds, but it changes everything. Her energy, once scattered in pursuit, becomes concentrated. She walks differently, not faster, but deeper. Her eyes no longer scan for signs of interest. They observe, discern, sense. Her voice softens, not from fear, but from calm knowing. The need to explain, to justify, to be chosen, fades. And in its place, something new emerges. A quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be performed. It's the power of a woman who has reclaimed her projections and owned her shadow. A woman who no longer confuses validation with love. Men begin to feel this difference before they can describe it. Some feel magnetized by her calm, drawn to the peace that radiates without effort. Others feel uncomfortable, because her self-possession exposes their own lack of it. And so, the dynamic reverses. The unavailable begin to chase, and the awakened simply observe. But she doesn't play the old game anymore. Her power now lies not in attracting, but in choosing. In Jung's language, this is the stage of individuation, the emergence of the true self, liberated from the compulsions of the unconscious. She no longer relates through need, she relates through awareness. Her love becomes intentional, not impulsive. Her attraction becomes intuitive, not addictive. She begins to understand that connection, at its highest form, is not about filling voids. It's about two complete beings meeting with open hearts. When she meets someone now, she doesn't rush to fuse. She listens, not just to his words, but to her own body. If her stomach tightens, if her breath shortens, If her intuition whispers, "Not safe," she honors that voice. She no longer interprets red flags as challenges. She interprets them as truth. And yet she doesn't close her heart. She remains open, but not exposed. She has learned the sacred difference between boundaries and walls. Boundaries protect love, walls imprison it. She knows this now. One day, a man enters her life who is different. Not louder, not more charming, not more exciting. Simply present. He listens without trying to fix. He speaks without performing. He holds space without withdrawing. And at first, she almost doesn't recognize it. Her nervous system, used to chaos, doesn't know what to do with peace. But instead of sabotaging it, she breathes through it. She lets safety feel foreign until it feels natural. And as she does, she realizes that this is what love was always meant to be. Not adrenaline, but alignment. Not pursuit, but partnership. The man's presence does not complete her, it complements her. Because she no longer comes from emptiness, but from fullness. Still, she knows this truth deeply. Availability in another can never replace availability within. If she abandons herself again, even the most conscious love will start to fade. So she remains devoted, not to him, but to her inner union. The sacred marriage of her own masculine and feminine energies. The masculine that protects, grounds, and leads with clarity. The feminine that feels, receives, and creates with intuition. Together, they form what Jung called the self. The full circle of wholeness that no relationship can either grant or take away. She looks back at the version of herself who once begged for love. And she feels no shame, only gratitude. That version of her was brave enough to reach, to hope, to care. But now, she understands that the reaching was never the problem. The problem was reaching outward before reaching inward. She smiles softly because she knows. The ones who never stayed still taught her how to finally stay with herself. Some endings don't come with doors slamming or tears falling. They come quietly. A woman simply exhales, unclenches her hands, and realizes she's no longer waiting. Not for a text. Not for closure. Not for someone to finally choose her. The spell breaks. Not because she forced herself to move on, but because she finally remembered who she is. There is a strange serenity in realizing that nothing was ever lost, only revealed. The people who couldn't meet her weren't villains. They were teachers, unintentional, imperfect, sacred. They showed her where she still abandoned herself. They mirrored her blind spots, her illusions, her unloved parts. And when their absence left her alone, it gave her the space to return to her own heart. For so long, she believed she needed to be enough for someone to stay. Now, she understands the deeper truth. She was never meant to be chosen by the emotionally unavailable. She was meant to be awakened by them. Awakened to her boundaries. Awakened to her silence. Awakened to her self-respect. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Now, she smiles at those words, because fate no longer feels cruel, it feels precise. Each heartbreak was a thread in her individuation, a sacred design pulling her toward inner union. The unavailable were never random. They were symbols, carriers of her own disowned energies. They embodied the masculine within her that had forgotten how to protect, lead, and stay. And now, she no longer seeks those qualities in another. She calls them home into herself. There is a quiet strength in her presence now. Her energy feels like dusk, soft, magnetic, unchaste. She doesn't need to prove her worth or advertise her calm. People can feel it. Where once her love poured outward like a flood, it now flows inward, a river of clarity. Her boundaries are not walls. They are sacred architecture, the temples through which only respect may enter. When an emotionally unavailable person appears again, and they always do, she no longer confuses attraction with destiny. She no longer believes the story of potential. She recognizes the pattern before it begins. And in that recognition, she chooses peace over passion, truth over fantasy. She doesn't fix. She doesn't chase. She doesn't explain. She simply sees. The world calls this detachment. But in the language of the psyche, it's something deeper. Differentiation. The moment when the self separates from the projection. Where love is no longer the merging of wounds, but the meeting of awareness. She can still feel deeply, but her feelings no longer drown her. She can still desire, but desire no longer deceives her. She can still love, but now love flows from choice, not compulsion. There's a particular kind of beauty that blooms in a woman after she's made peace with solitude. It's not loneliness, it's presence. Her evenings are no longer filled with waiting, they're filled with creation. Her thoughts are no longer consumed by absence, they're nourished by meaning. Her worth no longer trembles in the face of rejection, it expands in the presence of self-acceptance. She sits by candlelight, reading, journaling, creating art not for attention but for devotion. She is no longer performing femininity to be loved. She's embodying it because it is love. Her softness is no longer a strategy, it's her essence. Her strength no longer hardens her, it holds her. This is the mature feminine. Not the girl who pleads to be seen, but the woman who sees. The emotionally unavailable man. The phantom she once chased through text messages and dreams. Becomes something else now. A memory. A symbol. A lesson. She no longer hates him. She no longer romanticizes him. She blesses him. Because without his silence, she would have never found her own voice. Without his distance, she would have never learned the intimacy of self. Without his absence, she would have never discovered presence. Forgiveness, she realizes, isn't about excusing behavior. It's about releasing the energetic tether that kept her bound to the story. And when she forgives, not from naivety but from wisdom, something extraordinary happens. She becomes unavailable too. Unavailable to manipulation. Unavailable to emotional breadcrumbs. Unavailable to anything less than reciprocity and respect. From the outside she looks the same. Same smile. Same eyes. Same grace. But something invisible has shifted. A quiet sovereignty has taken root beneath her skin. She no longer needs to prove her softness or perform her power. She simply is. This is the paradox of true feminine energy. It doesn't chase, but it calls. It doesn't demand, but it draws. It doesn't beg, but it receives. Her aura feels like a secret, and only those who have done their own shadow work can see her clearly. The rest will sense her, admire her, desire her, but they won't be able to reach her, because her energy no longer vibrates at the frequency of need. There's a new kind of attraction she experiences now, not toward those who trigger her wounds, but toward those who honor her peace. Conversations become slower, deeper, intentional. There's no rush to define, no panic to perform. She doesn't seek chemistry, she seeks coherence. And when she meets someone who mirrors her growth, the connection feels sacred, not because it's perfect, but because it's conscious. Together, they hold mirrors that reflect truth, not illusion. They communicate, not to win, but to understand. They love, not to escape themselves, but to celebrate the parts of themselves they've already reclaimed. This is what the feminine was always meant to experience. Love not as a chase, but as a meeting. Still, she knows this. Wholeness isn't a destination, it's a rhythm. Some days she feels complete. Other days the old ache whispers, softly, like a ghost reminding her of who she once was. But now she doesn't run from it. She welcomes it home. Because she understands, the ache isn't regression. It's remembrance. Each wave of emotion invites her deeper into awareness. Each trigger, an initiation. Each silence, a sacred test. Will she abandon herself again, or stay? She stays. Again and again she stays. And in that staying, she becomes what the unavailable never could. Emotionally present, spiritually anchored, and energetically free. There's a scene. A quiet morning where she stands before the mirror, sunlight spilling across her skin. No makeup, no performance, just truth. She touches her reflection and sees not the girl who wanted to be loved, but the woman who is love. Her smile isn't for anyone watching. It's for the little girl inside her who finally feels safe. And as she turns away, She feels no sadness for what was left behind. Only gratitude, because everything that once broke her was actually building her. Every rejection was a redirection. Every silence was a sacred pause, preparing her for the day she would no longer chase love, but become it. In mythology, this is the final act, the return of the heroine, crowned not by victory, but by consciousness. She has entered the underworld of her own shadow, faced the illusions of her desire, and emerged whole, radiant, unhurried, sovereign. She walks through life now with the wisdom of paradox, soft and strong, loving yet detached, open yet discerning. She no longer fears solitude, she wears it like silk. She no longer mistakes love for rescue, she understands it as recognition. And when people ask her what changed, she doesn't give them theories. She simply smiles and says, "I stopped confusing the unavailable for the divine." At night she writes in her journal, not about longing, but about creation. Her dreams are no longer of being chosen, but of choosing projects, art, paths, peace. Her life feels like poetry written in stillness. There's space, breath, rhythm. She no longer fills her days to distract from emptiness. She lets the pauses exist, knowing they are part of the music. The woman who once lived in pursuit has now become a portal. Everything she thought she needed from others, she now generates within. The tension becomes awareness, affection becomes alignment, validation becomes vision. She has finally come home. And so, the story ends not with a reunion, but with a realization that love was never about finding the one who stays, but becoming the one who doesn't leave herself. The shadow no longer haunts her. It stands beside her, integrated, loyal, whole. Her inner masculine and feminine no longer wage war. They dance, creating harmony in the soul. This is the art of wholeness. This is the shadow truth. The woman who walks away in silence isn't cold. She isn't bitter. She isn't broken. She simply sees more.